Welcome to the Grand Shorts, a part of the Grand Podcast. The Grand. My name is Niels Tudor-Winter, and I am the creator, editor, and host of The Grand. The Grand is an independent, non-commercial podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. I have decided to make a short format to offer more concentrated episodes, but still with the same elements you already know. Insights, help, support, guidance, advice, reflections, and a few laughs along the way. Once per month I will release episodes in this format, and I will start out with batches of 3 episodes per release. In the first months I will zoom in on my career and the different roles that I have had, and share with you the insights I have acquired over my 15 years career. Here in the first 3 episodes I zoom in on my time in the Danish Agency for Science, Technology and Innovation. That was my first job. The first episode is a general introduction. The second zooms in on my role as a national contact point, and the last third episode digs into my work as program committee member in the framework program. Please enjoy. The Grand. Welcome to the Grand, the EU funding podcast. I've decided to try something new. For a long time, I have been wondering how I could make shorter formats. And at the same time, I realized that I have a lot of guests coming around and I'm covering a lot of things. All you regulars know that I do an effort to dig into as many corners as I can, slowly taking bite by bite, eating the elephant. But I have not been sharing experience from my own career and insights from my own career that definitely many would find interesting and useful. It's also some of the feedback that I do get from people when they discover the Grand, that there's a lot of content there that they really appreciate, from the detail going into different corners, the timeline series and so on. Now, I will try to make a short format, and I will try to make it into small series of let's see, 20-25 minutes, depending on how it will move on here. So this series, I would like to start sharing insights from my career. I will start out with the position I got when I first entered this area, the EU funding area. I had been working for a couple of years after leaving university as in a conference company that dealt with all kind of logistics related to conferences, and it was an alibi. I was looking for real work. I was struggling to get into what I wanted to do, and I eventually ended up, after sending out lots of applications and many rejections, lots of interviews and so on, I finally ended up in the Danish Agency for Science, Technology and Innovation, which is an agency under the Danish Ministry for Science, Technology and Innovation. So I became a civil servant, and I became a civil servant in the department of the agency that was dealing with the framework programs. So as some of you out there, or many of my listeners know, each country in at least in the EU, but also some of the accession countries, they have NCPs. All of the countries actually have NCPs. They have an NCP. They are obliged to have national contact points, which are abbreviated into NCPs. So I got a job in this department as a national contact point. But not only that, also as a program committee member. But I will first focus on the NCP function. So that was back in 2008. So this allows me to share a little bit with you what a national contact point professional is doing. So in the Danish context, the most important function of the NCP is to give support to stakeholders throughout Denmark on how to approach the European Commission's, the European Union's framework programs for research and development. And that function is fairly simple. It's fairly simple, but the most important thing is, of course, that you acquire the knowledge to be able to give it to universities and companies, especially. Those were the most important ones that we served. But in principle, the Danish Agency for Science, Technology and Innovation would support anybody. It's called Eurocenter, this section. Now, supporting stakeholders, it has many colors, right? So it comes, right? So what I entered into was that you would have direct people reaching out through email or by phone, reaching out to understand specific elements of how they could access specific call or where to find calls of interest and so on and so forth. But also what would happen when they had gotten money, so budget questions, patents, IPR questions, and so on and so forth. And this department, you would have colleagues that would cover the different sections of the framework program: energy, ICT, environment, SMEs. It looked a little different back then, the framework program 7. I think actually it was 7. So what you needed to do when I entered here as a young freshman, so to say, when I entered here, I needed, of course, to acquire a lot of knowledge. I needed to start. I didn't know anything about these things when I got the job. So I started to acquire knowledge. So this is what you do as an NCP. You read and you read and you read, and to understand exactly what is the framework program about, what are the calls about. And within your area, I was covering energy and SMEs and ICT. It's 2 quite big areas content-wise, and then the SME program. I was covering these areas, and of course, colleagues showed me where to find the documents, the work programs, to dig into this, and also the explanatory information, so to be able to support who would call. And it would be, of course, you cannot acquire all knowledge at the same time. So as an NCP, the longer you are an NCP within an area, the better you are, because of course knowledge stick, and you only have to update yourself sometimes when things change. So this is, for me, of course, in the beginning, there was a lot of digging in, which I actually found was the most difficult part of the work in the beginning, to understand the whole discourse of all this, of the EU R&D funding system. This is what I also shared with you in the podcast on the meta level, that it's a parallel world with lots of information and lots of discourses and language, different words you wouldn't use in normal life. So to understand all this, it took me a while. I had nice colleagues that supported me. But that's the NCP function, right? So when you reach out today, if you need to if you have questions concerning how to approach a specific call or where to find specific money for what you do, what to do, then you can approach your local national NCP organization, and they will give you a basic guidance. These are not consultants; they don't earn money on this. This is a public function and support. So they don't give you consultancy support. They will guide you in the right direction. They will show you where things are, and then you yourself have to find out how to move on when you have received that information. Now, what else is an NCP doing? So framing this, Yeah, it's the most important thing is to support the stakeholders. So that is also, of course, part of that is also information and communication work. So there would be a newsletter. So we would have a couple of communication people in our team, and they would send out a monthly newsletter, I think it was, and sometimes they would ask us to provide them with text concerning specific elements of the framework program that they would shed light on. So that would also be part of the job, and I'm very sure that they still do that. But that was a fairly simple thing. You need to learn the lingo to do this kind of communication language, right? But you get the hang of it quick, and it was small, and they would adjust it. They would just need the knowledgeable input. Then, of course, the NCP organization is doing information activities. So, meaning, of course, that besides from the newsletters, there would also be the function of getting out, going to information meetings, or even arranging proactively information meetings in universities or together with other stakeholders of innovation clusters or other supportive organizations doing a work within this, where you would then set up the event, you would make a program, you would make an agenda of how to present a specific part of the framework program that was your responsibility and focus of the day. Sometimes we would go maybe 2 or 3 even if we need to cover more. And then so it would be different, the level of how much we would be involved in organizing these events. But the prime issue here would be to make sure that there was a flow of information, meetings and events focused on a specific issue, and then preparing your presentation. I was not very good at this in the beginning, and I've been having some horrible experiences in the beginning where I was sent out to the country in Denmark, in different places where I would say many times. I remember vividly a meeting where I would say, I need to get back to you on that, probably 20 times. So that it felt lonely. It felt a little lonely and scary on that stage. But you get over these things, and any NCP that listens to this will remember when they started how much information they had to plow through and certain situations where they would struggle a little bit when they were out in the public. But when I think back, those were the main activities of the NCP function. This work as an NCP, it was mirrored into the policy and lobbying work, because in Denmark, it's not everywhere like this, but in our department at that time, the NCPs, they were also the program committee members representing Denmark in the program committees. Now, I'm going to run a specific podcast episode much more in depth about the program committee work, and there will be several episodes about this because it's very interesting. But just to open it up a little bit, so the program committees, that's where the member states of the European Union sits and decides what the content of the actual work program should be. So that is the last stage in the whole process of a work program coming through from nothing until a full 500-page document. That's the last stage before the Commission finally settles it. So this is where the text come, and you have program committees they are divided into the same areas as the work programs of Horizon Europe. So you would have regular meetings in Brussels where we would go and follow the process. So when the cycle of the work programs were flowing, back then it was annually that there were changes to the program. So there would be a certain annual life cycle where you would receive the first draft at a certain time, very limited, and you would see the first sort of development of where things would go. You would prepare yourself before the meeting, and you would understand the position of Denmark. So would it be relevant vis-a-vis what the Danish political, the government's position within specific things? Now, here, the system in Denmark and most countries, I would guess, you would have built up reference groups, local reference groups, national reference groups within a specific area. So in Denmark, there would be a reference group for energy. And the reference group would be, there you would have representatives from all corners of research and industry and SMEs and other relevant stakeholders in relation to the energy. And they would be appointed, those members, by the government, by the ministry. They would give their position. They would, so as a program committee member, I would go with the draft, and then I would share that with the reference group. They would look things through, and they would then agree on comments and input. And then I would go to a program committee meeting, and I would make sure that the input was handed over to the rest of the committee from Denmark. And often these things would be coordinated with other countries. So it's a lot of negotiating and alliance building and so on to make sure that things go in the direction where your own country wants things to go. You not always get what you want, of course, in such a situation. It's like this in the European Union, in such a multinational collaboration. But the whole idea is that the work that I did, and that I will dig into in another program in more depth, was to be the actual representative for the country in this committee, and then make sure that all the information received at the meetings, all the information received in between the meetings, were passed by the reference group to make sure that they agreed. So there would be so this whole process would, of course, be back and forth until the final work program would be ready, final draft. So in this process, you can imagine, so you're a civil servant. So that was also the job. So that was sort of taking a lot of time, because you need to make sure everybody is agreeing. You need to write resumes. You need to make sure that things are well understood. You need to, if there's something that you missed, or then you need to check with other program committee members just to make sure that you got everything right. Waiting also for the commission's own update and resume from the meetings, and then forwarding that in a proper civil, like public government official way for these standards to the reference group, and then having meetings with them, most of the time physically, back then at least, and then gathering information and back again and back and forth and so on and so forth. So that extremely interesting work, especially for someone like me at the time, when you're young, head of unit, fresh out almost from university. Of course, extremely interesting, and I am actually planning to invite some of the people that are sitting in program committees now, so you can get a little bit more information about how that work is. Also, on the NCP work, there would also be meetings in Brussels. So there would be gatherings of the NCPs, not as often as a program committee, but on a regular, it's so many years ago, but I think it was 4 or 5 times per year, something like this. And a fantastic work to I remember I was extremely proud and happy to have a work where I would suddenly be flying to Brussels. I would fly every month almost. There would be something where I would go. Such a wonderful experience and exciting. I can still remember the feeling of going to that job and then realizing, I'm flying all over Europe, Brussels most of the time, but also sometimes to Budapest or the place. And actually, to maybe here in the end of this first short episode, keep it on an anecdotal level. My first day at work was actually to show up in the airport and fly to Berlin, because I was taking over a coordinator role for an FP6 project that the agency was coordinating. The former one, he had left his job, and that was his position I took over. So they decided to give it to me, which was that was showing a lot of guts, I would say, from my former boss, former managers. She was a great manager. She handed that over to me. So my first day was to go to Berlin with her, my manager, for a partner meeting on Universität des Kunstes, I think it was, in Berlin. And I was I was supposed to coordinate that meeting. So I was coordinating that meeting without having any knowledge. I of course has received some information beforehand, but I was supposed to coordinate this 2-day meeting, partner meeting, and it was on the back of some troubles that they have had in relation to they had some issues on where the project had going. So it was, everybody was angry, or not in a very good mood. But I managed to make a good atmosphere, and I managed to coordinate, and my manager was happy. So, this is the end of the first part of this the grand shorts insights, and with the subtopic of insights from my career. Next up, as already shared with you in the beginning of this episode, you will have a short episode zooming in more detail on the NCP function that I had. And then in the third episode, following that episode, you will get more details on my role as a program committee member and what the program committees they are. Stay tuned. The grand